Hi, I'm Louis DeSimone. Today I would like to read for you a passage from my novel Channeling Morgan, published by Beautiful Dreamer Press. The first section of the book takes place at a writer's workshop where the protagonist, Derek Sweetwater, is studying with a world-famous novelist called Graham Whitcomb. The workshop for Derek's piece has not gone very well, so he's a bit despondent. However, at the same workshop, he has met someone who he is quite smitten with, so at least the week hasn't been a total loss. This section takes place at a reading at the end of the workshop where Derek is attending with his friend Sarah. The program director, an earnest woman named Alma Kittredge, introduced the readers one by one, beaming each time as if she were in the presence of Austen and Fitzgerald themselves. She was one of the believers, Derek thought. She had faith that the next Hemingway really was in this room. Derek wasn't so sure. First up was Agnes. Derek recognized the passage from the story she'd workshopped, but she had clearly revised it significantly in the past few days. Unfortunately, it was mostly dialogue, but she made no distinction between the voices themselves. That, combined with the nervous speed with which she read, made it impossible to tell the difference between the characters. "Ah, well," Sarah whispered over the applause. "At least she has that British accent. I'm not sure what else could save that twaddle." "You're incorrigible," he said. "I know. Isn't it delicious?" While the prose writers read just a few pages of a single work, most completely out of context, the poets had time to read several pieces. Ashton Boehner managed to squeeze in 4 poems, but Derek had trouble telling them apart. Ashton's voice rose with each stressed syllable, and each line ended with the interrogative inflection Derek had come to see as de rigueur for poetry readings. And just in case the audience couldn't hear the rhythm, exaggerated as it was, Ashton rocked back and forth over the page, as though propelled by the stress marks. "When the sunset glittered on the broken shards of my soul, a cicada chirped in the pasture." The words coasted over Derek's head. His mind was wandering back to yesterday, to the pattern of freckles on Jared's neck, a pixelated map of Greece. Sarah's head drooped over Derek's shoulder, her lips open beside his ear. "Get me out of here?" she whispered. Alma took to the podium again with a portentous expression. "Our final reader," she said, "requires no introduction from me." Sarah couldn't help herself. Why is it that immediately after saying that, they always go on to introduce someone? Derek stifled a laugh and turned his attention back to Alma. "Graham Whitcomb has been a literary idol of mine for quite some time now, and I'm happy to say he's now a friend. His newest novel, Charity, received the National Book Award, and he's offered to read a passage from it for us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, Graham Whitcomb." Emerging from a corner of the room, Graham made his way to the podium through a loud ovation. Thank you, he said, scowling in faux humility. Derek wondered what he'd been like before the award, when he was just another writer struggling for attention. He wondered if Graham had been as much in love with himself then as he seemed to be now. Graham placed his copy of the book upon the podium, several pink post-its sticking out from the side. He held one and flipped the book open. Then, lifting it dramatically into the air, he began to read. His voice was suddenly deeper, the cadence slow, syrupy, pauses coming at odd points, phrases lilting like waves. "The only misfortune in Charity Sharp's life," he read, "was the size of her ambition. Since childhood, she had imagined herself a successful novelist, her name filling shelves in the library, her photograph in the windows of bookshops, literary hordes begging for her autograph, prizes bestowed, the pantheon open to another figure. She worked hard. She wrote her first short story at the age of 7, her first novel in her teens. She was always writing, always reading the great authors for inspiration and tips on style. She took creative writing classes in college, got an MFA at a small Midwestern university known more for its agriculture programs than its art. She tried on the style of other successful writers for practice, seeking the elusive voice her teachers always spoke about, the laconic Hemingway, the circular Woolf, the bellowing bellow. Charity had the diligence, the sensitivity, even the imagination of a great writer. What she didn't have, and what none of her teachers and role models could give her, was talent. Sarah stifled a laugh, which came out as a quiet snort, and quickly turned into a deliberate cough as cover, the sound enhanced by the dramatic gesture of a hand against her chest. Of course, Derek had read the book before, but then it had just been a story. Now, in this environment, he understood it had come from this world so familiar to Graham and so new to him. The room was full of Charity Sharps. Perhaps, he thought, Graham had chosen this passage as a passive-aggressive message, or perhaps just a warning. He wondered, indeed, if Graham had chosen it specifically for him. Graham shifted his gaze around the room as he read, as though he were checking that the whole group was still with him, or perhaps he was looking for the reassurance of the occasional nodding head. The language remained stiff, whether in description or dialogue, but Graham's voice climbed and fell dramatically. He periodically peered over his glasses to heighten the effect. The book had sounded completely different in Derek's head, as he'd read it casually in his armchair on the subway on a park bench. Now, in Graham's voice, the tragedy of the story was immediately apparent. The sudden silence when Graham closed the book was jarring. In just a few minutes, Derek had fallen into another world. He realized now, in a way that had escaped him before, that Charity was indeed a radical departure. Graham's previous work had been good, but it was all of a piece. This book seemed to have sprung of its own accord, as if its energy had been swirling through the world looking for a channel. It had finally found one in Graham Whitcomb. Sarah nudged him in the midst of the applause. "Can we go now?" she whispered. "Yes, please." Derek squeezed past the people to his left and led her out of the room. They waited to talk until they were safely outside. "Thank God," Sarah said. "If I had to listen to one more poet, I would have lost my mind." "Ashton's kind of sweet," Derek said, in a tragic way. He read each poem as if he'd never seen it before. "Method acting." Sarah led him toward the sidewalk. "But I have to say, no wonder so many people hate poetry when it all sounds exactly like this." "You forgot the hand gestures," Derek said. He spread his arms out like wings and skipped along the street, swooping under the trees. Sarah caught up, laughing loudly, and fell against him. It took several blocks before their laughter trickled out. Finally, Sarah asked, her tone strangely serious, "So what are you going to do, now that this extravaganza is over?" They were just emerging from the quiet side of town. At this point, people were sauntering in both directions along the street. "We're staying in town for a few more days," he said. "While whale watching, if you're interested." "No thanks," she said. "I've had enough creatures blowing hot air for 1 week. She paused. "No, I was asking about your career. Are you going to go home now and write the great American novel?" That was an easy one. No, he said crisply. "I think we can rest assured of that." "Don't give up, Derek." The moon was surprisingly low and huge in the sky. "I wouldn't say I'm giving up," he said, "but I am rethinking what I want. You know what the Buddhists say, Derek? Detach from the outcome. Just do it." I thought that was Yoda. Him too. Thank you very much.